I hate to interrupt the conversation. I know it's good. It's always so much fun to get together with fellow Silurians. There is no crowd like a bunch of journalists that can talk and tell good stories, because isn't that what we all did? And some still do. So I hate to interrupt, but you know, we try to get you out the door at 2 o'clock, and I do think the tables are cleared. The desserts will be coming, and I want you to have plenty of time to ask questions to Mary, who is a fun person who has had quite a wonderful background in the news business and is still working in it, which is why it was touch and go when she would arrive. And there's only one little disappointment, and that is that she put together a video, and she had told me that it would be a DVD, and the folks at ABC who did it, of course, are much more high-tech than DVDs and didn't bring a DVD but brought something that this dining room is not set up for. It's set up for a DVD. This is not a control room, so they can't just bang, snap, change for an electronic download from God knows where that'll, you know, do the latest thing. So we're not going to have the video, but we are going to have Mary, and Mary's a lot of fun. And I will tell you a little bit more about her, but first there's something I forgot to say earlier, and that is, you know, I read off all those names of the categories that we've got for the awards, and I'm encouraging you to sign up and join. We are putting the names of the categories, because I know you didn't all write them down. We are putting them on the website. So you can go to silurians.org and you can see all the awards categories and a lot of other good stuff there. By the way, if you could, and we've heard a lot of people say, oh, I couldn't make it to the Gay Talese Lifetime Achievement Award dinner, and I heard it was so wonderful. I am so sorry I didn't get to hear him. Well, guess what? This man in the back, Carlos Otero, has been taking video of all of our speakers. It's there. You can see and hear the event with Gay Talese. Just go to silurians.org. You can hear all of them if you miss them. If it's too snowy in February and you can't get here for the speaker, by the way, we're going to have some terrific speakers this winter. So, you know, get your boots out. We're going to have Peter Gelb on the 3rd Wednesday of January here for lunch. And we're going to have Jane Bryant Quinn for the 3rd Wednesday in February. She'll solve our money problems. Peter will deal with, and the club doesn't have any, but I don't know about you individually, or, you know, she'll give us personal finance advice. But we got some really good things coming up. But if you miss it, if you happen to get the flu, God forbid, whatever, it's online. Go to silurians.org and you can take part and see it. And Gay Talese was so inspirational, so I just wanted to be sure you heard that. Now then, about today, we thought that it might be fun in the holiday fun season to have somebody who deals with that zany, crazy, wild, woolly, and wonderful stuff called morning news. I actually am a graduate of that. Back in the 1980s, I was at the CBS Morning News. Maybe some of you remember that. I certainly do. And I always say I was at the Morning News from Diane Sawyer through Maria Shriver. Yeah, you know, they changed every so often because CBS was the perennial at the bottom of the pit on the whole thing. But at any rate, and there were moments that should forever be forgotten. One in particular, between Diane Sawyer and Maria Shriver came somebody named Phyllis George. Do you remember Phyllis George? Yeah, I worked with Phyllis. She was a Miss America. And somebody got the brilliant idea of putting a rape victim and the rapist on the same program in the same time slot. I don't know how these people ever agreed to appear in the same room at the same time. At the end of this segment, Phyllis George suggested they hug each other. Yeah. That was morning news then. Anyway, it's a little different. And Mary is an interesting person because she's a producer at Good Morning America, the ABC program, which has become the #1 in morning news. And morning news is what people are watching in greater and greater numbers, whereas evening news is having fewer and fewer viewers. There is a changing face of TV news that Mary will talk about. The mornings are wacky, often glamorous, deliriously action-packed. The pressures on the producers are insane. I don't know how she does this, and being the mother of 4 young children, ages 3 to 8. But she has a wonderful husband who is here, who I know helps out in that department. In addition to this high-energy woman has written a book called White Dresses, which just came out this fall, and that talks about her early years of getting into all of this. She was at CNN, she was in Istanbul, she was in war zones, so she knows the news business in many, many areas. She's won 4 Emmys, a DuPont, a pair of Edward R. Murrow Awards, and a WGA Award for Excellence in Feature Writing. So this is a gal who has really done it all and seen a lot, and she's been for 13 years in the morning news slot. By the way, we have a dozen copies of White Dresses, which not only talks about her period in the news business, but is also a bit of a love story to her mother. And so some of you who may get inspired and who may not have all your Christmas gifts together, we're going to sell these. The cover price is $16. We're going to sell them for $13, and Mary can sign them for you out there at the table afterwards, should you so desire. But in the meantime, I think you want to hear from this very talented, incredibly energetic, dynamic, award-winning television producer, Mary Pflum. And she's a Silurian.
Thank you to Betsy. It's really an honor to be, thank you. Please keep me honest on this. Thank you. It's a real honor to be with all of you today. I'd like to thank Betsy for kindly inviting me to join all of you. It's wonderful. Okay, any better? Any better? That was it. I think it was. If I hold it, is it better? Okay. It's great on a number of levels. I love the National Arts Club, especially at this time of year. I think it's truly magical. And I love the Silurians. You guys are a really, really, really wonderful group. I'm very honored. I'm actually seated with a couple of the people responsible for me becoming a Silurian. When I moved back to New York and to the United States in general, I missed being overseas. I had been based in Istanbul for a couple of years with CNN, and I was living out of a suitcase, but I missed riveting and compelling conversation with people who really cared about the news. And unfortunately, that could be difficult to have some of those kind of weighty conversations about international matters and kind of nuanced conversations about what was going on in the news. So I joined the Overseas Press Club first when I came back, and at a meeting with Overseas Press Club, Ellen Dodds-Frank and Linda Getz-Helms, who I'm fortunate to be seated with today, they said, hey, if you're looking for some interesting journalists, you should check out the Silurians. And they invited me to a luncheon to check it out, and I was very fortunate. I was seated at that first luncheon. I arrived late, unfortunately, like today, same circumstance, because I was trying to get down from Upper West Side, where ABC News is located, and I was working on a story, and I came in kind of breathless, like today, and I was seated next to this gentleman who very politely but pointedly asked me why I was late, because it was between the first and second course. And I said, I'm working on this story at the time. This is about 10 years ago, on a new outbreak of the avian flu. It was the worst outbreak in quite some time. And he asked me a series of very pointed and just very intelligent questions. And it was quite a nice gentleman. And And I said, you know a lot about the avian flu. And he said, well, I should. I'm a survivor of the original outbreak, or the outbreak you're referencing. And I very kind of rather arrogantly said, oh, no. I've been doing my research, and I know from an interview I just conducted with a member of the medical community, the last big outbreak was about a century ago, and it was contained to parts of Eastern Europe and Asia. And he said, that's right. It was in Constantinople where I contracted this. And he, of course, was saying Constantinople, not Istanbul. And I said, that can't be. And he pulled out his driver's license. And I was seated next to the very wonderful Farnsworth Fowle, who regaled me over the course of a really delightful luncheon about our shared time in Istanbul. He had grown up there, and then, of course, did great work as a print journalist over in Turkey. And we compared notes on how difficult then and now it is to be a journalist, especially now with what's going on. But it was, when I was there as well, 15 years ago, very, very difficult to be a journalist in Turkey, navigating between East and West, democracy and a quasi-military state. And I was hooked. I called my husband after the lunch and I said, I had the best lunch ever. I just was so compelled, and I thought if Farnsworth Fowle was any indication of this kind of group, I wanted to be a part of it. So I'm very honored. And as a quick side, yes, yeah, you guys are great. But my other favorite part of the luncheon, which let me know about just the nuance of being a Silurian, when I asked Farnsworth Fowle at the close of the luncheon, I was very excited to have met this new friend who had shared my past in Turkey. I said, can I please email you? And he looked at me and he said, email. He said, call me. And I said, okay. So I gave him my business card, and I asked if he had one, or if he would give me his number. I was going to flip over my card, and he said, I'm in the telephone book. Use it. It was a wonderful moment. So I salute him, and I learned much that day. So I regret that I can't make as many luncheons as I would like, because as mentioned, I'm a working journalist of ABC News, Good Morning America, where, as Betsy noted, I've been there for 13 years. My assignments, as is the nature of morning television, vary. ABC originally brought me on to do a lot of breaking news. They love my CNN background, which I'll get into in a moment, and being overseas and whatnot. The nature of morning news is very varied. The reason I am late today, hopefully you will laugh, it's because we're having an ugly Christmas sweater competition tomorrow for our anchors. So my assignments are greatly varied, where our anchors are going to be modeling. It's our 4th annual ugly Christmas sweater competition, and we had some changes in costumes for tomorrow. For before I came, and we're working out things. We've got a celebrity guest rapper who's helping be a judge, 2 Chainz. So it's a very varied workflow and work assignment, as my husband can attest, that one day we're working on an interview with the president, which may be in the first half hour. And by the end of the show, we're doing pieces examining dogs and braces, literally braces for their teeth. So it's a really it's a varied world. It's a strange world to be under the pressure to, on a daily basis, at once inform our viewers and also put a smile on their faces. We've got people, as Betsy had noted. The morning show audience is a unique one. It's one where we've got people walking out the door to go to work, and we've got people getting their children ready for school, and we've got people somewhere in between. The televisions are on in kitchens and living rooms, they're on at the gym, they're on, sometimes we hear stories from our viewers, in bathrooms. It's a rather intimate space that we take up in the morning. It's a different kind of pressure to at once inform without repelling. It's a balance that I think much of the news industry faces today, but I think it's especially intimate in the morning when people are watching us literally in their pajamas or while they're shaving. We hear all kinds of stories. And so it's been a fascinating time for me as a journalist, and now also in my roles as wife and mother, to see firsthand how this news is being digested, what's being consumed, what people are interested in paying attention to. It's obviously a dark time where in the morning show atmosphere, we're having to make the difficult decisions as we go from half hour to half hour. We're a 2-hour show. The beginning of the show, of course, we want to bring people up to date, most of all on what they've missed while they've been sleeping. Is there an economic crisis brewing overseas since the markets opened overseas? Did ISIS attack again? Is there something more that's come out on the overnight in any number of the shootings that are unfortunately are becoming more and more common? Difficult decisions about obviously the very dark summer, not this past summer, but the summer before, ISIS beheadings. How do we handle that for our viewers? Also cognizant that, again, we've got a number of young mothers who like waking up with us and be informed before they take the children to the bus stop, and children are watching. It's a very fine line to walk. And of course we're working with more and more in which people, when they wake up in the morning, the first thing that they're reaching for, even before their cup of coffee, is their phone. And their phone is a fascinating challenge, I think, for all of us in TV news today. I think all of us in news. That in terms of how we compete with the phone. Do we want to compete with the phone in terms of how people are digesting their information as they wake up to not only see what calls they missed, what emails they might have missed on the overnight, but also how they want to digest their own news personally before they even potentially sit down to watch us, depending on the hours in which they woke up. So a little bit of my background. I joined GMA just over 13 years ago. And at the time, I was struggling to understand what direction the winds of journalism were blowing. I graduated with a degree in history here in town from Columbia in 1994. And when I was in school, like so many would-be, wannabe journalists, I had been on the staff of the Columbia Daily Spectator. I really love print. I love to write. That explains in part the publication of my book. That was where my passion was, but we were all assigned a career development advisor, which at the time was rather new, and now it's, if any of you have children in college, I think it's very much par for the course. But the then new career development advisor told me, you want to be a print journalist, good luck. She was concerned about the number of dailies that were folding across the nation, which of course, unfortunately, has only increased in recent years. I had been fortunate when I grew up in Wisconsin, and I had been fortunate. I had worked for my daily newspaper, both in high school. They gave me a little scholarship to the Columbia University Journalism Camp for high school students. And to work off my scholarship money, I wrote for the daily paper, which they didn't, I would have done it for free. I would have done anything just to be part of the paper. And I was very, very lucky that I got to be part of that. And that paper, remarkably, a small town of 14,000 in Wisconsin, is still around. It's still a daily paper, which is tremendous. But they allowed me to do everything from soup to nuts. I wrote the articles, I took the pictures, I did the paste up process. I was so happy. I would be able to walk into the back. There was still a back warehouse attached where we would roll the presses at around noon, which, believe it or not, all of this makes me sound like an old lady to the interns at GMA. I know a lot of you already know how all of this works, but it was really intoxicating for me, not just because of the fumes of the press, but it was intoxicating for me. I loved print, but I was really guided in the direction of TV, and I said, well, if I'm going to do TV, I want to do something that I feel like is really going to be pertinent and on the upswing. So I was encouraged to join CNN, which at the time, 1993 is when I joined, and Mike Kendall can attest to this, as I bow down to all of the original pioneers of CNN, because it really was this great frontier. There was still the spirit of frontierism, I think, in the 90s. CNN had just finished catapulting to success with the original Gulf War and the Boys of Baghdad, and so when I did my internship, I was very lucky. I worked with a colleague of Mike's, Richard Roth, who really took me under his wing and kind of introduced me to the wonderful, maddening world of TV news. And I was hooked, and I got to travel the world. A wonderful foreign editor at CNN. We didn't say foreign, we said international. Editor at CNN, Steve Cassidy, he knew I was really hungry to go overseas, and so he told me to sell my car in Atlanta. At this point, I went from New York down to Atlanta. I was doing some on-camera work for CNN, and I was very lucky. They gave me a chance to really cut my teeth. This was when Ted Turner was still in charge and before the AOL Time Warner merger. And you could pitch a story and it would find a home on CNN or Headline News or Airport Network, all of the Turner networks. But he told me to sell my car if I wanted to go overseas, and it was like I was a member of a cult. I did it. And he said, "You're serious then?" And so they sent me to Berlin for a year, and then to Istanbul for a couple of years. And it was a really great time. I helped launch a network in Turkey called CNN Turk. It was a partnership with the Dewan Media Group out of Istanbul. Covered a lot of amazing stories ranging from the Vienna Balls, 1 week to it be war zones in the Khyber Pass the next. In the Khyber Pass, I had done a story that was my last big international story for CNN on the plight of the Afghan refugees who were under duress because of the Taliban and were trying to flee to Pakistan, and there weren't many places they could flee. It was also tangentially related to when we were in the Khyber Pass, of course, Osama bin Laden was in hiding. And no sooner had I gotten back to Karachi, where it was kind of our base camp, and I was going to get ready to go back to Istanbul, then I had a cell phone ring in a deli in Karachi. And over a crackled phone line, my then boss at CNN told me that there was some fallout from that recent AOL Time Warner merger, which many of you may remember when, Turner had been independent, then Time Warner bought Turner, and then Time Warner merged with AOL, and so there were over 400 of us cut, but the phone line kept cutting out. So I literally, as I talk about in my book, I had to put the pieces together. I was trying to buy some water and some Diet Coke, and I said over the phone line, and we'd just come back and had this rather dramatic trip through the Khyber Pass, and a little bit harrowing and kind of sticky on the way back, getting through some checkpoints and some gunfire, and on this crackly phone line, he cut out when he was trying to tell me that I was fired. And so I had to ask, are you trying to tell me I can't hear you? You cut out. Am I gone? Yes, we were all gone. I mean, there were a number of us gone. There were worse horror stories. Apparently, there was in terms of how people found out. Apparently, there was. Did you hear this, Mike? That there was some correspondent in D.C. Right? She was ready to go live, and she was on the live return. Did you guys hear this? Did you hear that? Yeah. Anyway, it was a bad time. It was a dark time for CNN. The poor woman was about to go live and was told in the return the whole network saw her get her exit. So at this time when I was leaving CNN, it was a changing time. I came to CNN because I thought it was up and coming. I'd been told in college, print not the way to go. Newspapers are dying. Went to CNN, thought that was pretty steady, and then a couple of mergers later, I found out the way a lot of people find out. When mergers go through and they bring in groups like the McKinsey Group. My favorite story, by the way, with the CNN merger, we knew there was trouble. I spent the last part of my time at CNN going back and forth between Atlanta and Istanbul. It was a really neat, combination of opportunities. And I was back in Atlanta, and the merger, Steve Case had kind of done the handshake deal, but the final merger wasn't done. So it was like the fall prior to the merger being done. And it was the fall of hanging chads. It was the fall of, the tide election. And the McKinsey Group had come through. At the time, I was so ignorant. I was living in my bubble brain of living out of Istanbul. I didn't know what the McKinsey Group was. I didn't know what it meant that they were coming through. I didn't understand why this group that was coming through none of them were journalists, and they didn't know how this worked. And I got selected to be one of the people that they questioned. There was a group of men in suits I shouldn't say all men, I think there was one woman. And they wanted to know why we'd gone so far over budget as a news organization for the election in 2000. And we explained that there was a tie, essentially. I mean, I know that's debatable, okay, but it was being contested, and we suddenly, we allowed for budgets up until that first Tuesday of November, and so we'd only allowed for that long, and when the election went further, suddenly we had to have. You all understand, satellite trucks and around-the-clock crews in D.C. for the Supreme Court and down in Broward County and, in other places where there were hanging chads. And this went on for a while, and of course staking out Bush and staking out Gore and all of our analysts. So obviously we went way over budget. And the McKinsey group said, with a straight face, that we should have anticipated an anomaly of a potential tied election. And at that point, I think we all should have known we were in trouble, that they were pointing fingers, that we somehow should have had a crystal ball in our budget going in. So when all of this was happening, I had gone from being a very Pollyanna journalist. I sometimes compare my time in early CNN to being the kid on the bike when you're first learning to ride the bike, and then, it's really great because you're kind of flying. And I was flying, and I was doing these amazing international stories. And then at the time of the AOL merger and the layoff notice and things like the McKinsey group telling us we should have known better and seeing the business side of things rear its head, I felt like the kid that went crashing down and discovered gravity for the first time, and you're kind of picking yourself back up, like, what's next? And I remember telling a colleague, I had a wonderful old friend at CNN. He and I had kind of grown up together, and he, instead of going overseas, had come to ABC, and he, at that time, had risen to be Peter Jennings' writer. And I was walking with him here in New York after the layoff, and I said, I just want to work for a show that's not going to go off the air, that's not in dire danger of a takeover that will drive lots of people out. Of course, that's kind of quite, but this was my criteria. And then I could, still do some international and national work, some interesting work that'll hopefully be on the upward swing. And he said, hands down, you got to go to morning TV. That's the upward swing. And he was, even though he was working for World News Tonight, and of course Peter was an amazing, illustrious journalist, he was well aware that within the same building was Good Morning America, and that's where a lot of people were looking. When I came to GMA, and he was right on all counts, everything that he said was going to happen would happen. It was on the upward swing. We weren't going to go off the air, and so far, no takeover of any outside company. Disney had acquired ABC a couple of years prior. But it was pretty safe terrain, safe in that the show was steady, a little bit rockier terrain in that we were number 2. And in the morning show wars, it was quite an intense battle because Good Morning America historically had been number 1 for a number of years, and then had fallen to number 2 to the Today Show. And it was an intense war. When I came 13 years ago, it was under the auspices of Shelley Ross, was the then executive producer, and really wanted to go for number 1. So it was a fascinating time to be on this different swing, no longer the international news, but very interesting news. And we were doing things differently. Still news, still information, but this strange combination that only happens in morning TV, as Betsy knows, of sometimes that extra stunt. And sometimes that stunt could sound crazy, and that could work. My first fall with the show, we had this Baby Oh Baby broadcast where we had babies born. It was very much kind of like reality TV. Babies born throughout the whole show, throughout the whole 2 hours. We're going live to different hospitals, and we had camera crews live in different delivery rooms, and any number of things could have happened. And it may have sounded crazy, and a lot of people initially told Shelley it was crazy. But it worked. There were actually some very touching moments where our Charlie Gibson, who's a wonderful seasoned journalist and an amazing journalist in his own right, crying on air in a really nice, authentic way. But that was the world of morning TV that I came into, where we really were going for number 1, and we were trying to find that footing. And so it's been a fascinating ride, seeing the evolution to I mean, covering stories, and I'm sorry we weren't able to show you the video, but I was going to try to show you just the range and what we're doing. I mean, it's everything from, investigative, thoughtful pieces on Vladimir Putin, or some of my, when I just look at my own assignments, they sent me to follow Barack Obama when he was just a up-and-coming senator in Illinois. Really interesting pieces to, some of the crazier stunts that we're doing, like tomorrow's Christmas sweater competition. It's been an interesting ride finding that footing of that morning show audience. We did succeed in taking the #1 spot from the Today Show a couple of years ago. It was hard fought, but it was again kind of reinventing the wheel a little bit. When I had come, really part of our winning formula, for example, when I had come to Good Morning America, and for years prior, part of the winning formula in a morning show team was what we sort of called mom and dad. When I came, it was Diane Sawyer and Charlotte Gibson, and of course for years the Today Show as well. I mean, all of you can name the different male, female, the main anchor components. Part of, I think, the secret to the success of the Good Morning America formula is a little bit more, it's very much team-like. The View certainly had invented that format to a degree where we've got a team of anchors, where we certainly are led by Robin Roberts and George Stephanopoulos. But we have a very solid team, our current team, Amy Robach and Ginger Z, and we also have Michael Strahan joining us, where there's different components, and it's very much an evolving process to kind of reflect, I think, the changing needs and interests of what I think viewers want, and the changing appetite. Some might say, to a degree, the short attention span of viewers, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it's in terms of them wanting additional options. I often tell people when they ask me what a morning show producer does in a word, everything, especially today. It's not only to be one part booker and one part producer and one part writer, which has always to a degree been the case. It's to be able to do both a wickedly interesting tape piece and to be able to go live in a heartbeat, and also to be a babysitter, and even a zookeeper on the days when we have animals on the set, which is often with Jack Hanna. And it's increasingly to be tech savvy. We're forever adding to the way we do news, tell stories. We can now go live literally from our cell phones. They just had me do a segment doing it. It's amazing what you can do without a full camera crew. It's a bit contentious, but it actually works. But as crazy and exciting and sometimes daunting as the new technology is, our new real daunting task right now is to figure out the changing audience. The dawn of the same cell phone that enables us to go live from a room like this one is that same cell phone is causing us the competition that I referred to earlier. And so when people get up in the morning, for most of my 13 years at the show, they may be turning on their television as part of their morning TV, but now they're turning to see, what's going on in the news and their own individual consumption on that cell phone. They're also, we're finding, people, DVR is a real challenge for, I think, all of us in television news as well. Maybe they used to turn us on in the morning. Maybe they've been watching the football game the night before. For whatever reason, they would turn us on. But now, when they turn the television on, many people are binge watching in the morning. They're catching up on what they missed the night before. So there's a whole new set of competition that doesn't just involve our folks, our friends. Many of us are all very, very friendly over at the Today Show. So where is the future of morning TV? It's a great question. 6 million people still tune in and watch GMA every morning. 6 million viewers consider our anchor team members of their extended family. But those 6 million people are torn in so many different directions when it comes to news consumption and when it comes to entertainment. And those 6 million people have different attention spans than they did even a decade ago. In a tech-savvy world in which messages are limited to a few characters and in which people are forever seeking to hit refresh on their inboxes, the pressure to be short and pithy and flashy and concise and up to the minute all at once is constant. Doing all of that while still meeting the strict and wonderful standards of the ABC News division. So we're up to the task, but the bar is forever being raised, is what we're increasingly finding, I think, across the board in morning TV. The aim of morning television has been forever to provide folks with a start to their day that includes a balance of news and information and to put a smile on their faces. We will continue to meet that goal through our constant formula of great anchors, a strong team, and great ideas that have people talking all day long. There are a few constants in this ever-changing world of TV, but one of them that's sure to stay, at least for the foreseeable future, is morning television. And so with that said, I say good afternoon, and on behalf of the GMA, we hope to see you in the morning, every morning in some form to come.
We're supposed to have a mic to move around with. Carlos has it. We'll let you have this one. We have time for just a few questions.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, hi, Jerry Eskenazi. You used the word quirky in talking about some of the segments. What is the difficulty that presents in making transitions from one to another? You may have a very serious or comedic, so how does that work?
We work hard on that. I mean, we work in terms of, sometimes it can be as simple as a location change for our anchors going from outside to in, from inside to out, just a change in the anchor. It's not an easy science. I mean, we have to work hard on that. In general, it's broken up, our half-hour blocks help set a certain tone. The first half hour, of course, being the most serious of the show, really kind of updating folks as to what they missed the night before, what they really need to know in the day ahead. Our second half hour, much more legal in tone, the latest court cases, or continuing on, depending on what's going on in the world. And the second half hour may remain very serious if there's been some breaking news overnight or breaking news during the show. And that should be noted as well. We're on from 7 to 9 live on the East Coast, but we're always going, I shouldn't say always, but we're forever going live. For West Coast updates. If something is going on, we're very cognizant this is now, it's a very fluid thing, and we're under the auspices of the ABC News Division. So above all, though, in answer to your question, above all, news breaks, all the quirk is off the table. One of the biggest challenges of the show, once upon a time, way before I came, actually not so long before I came, from what I understand, that's one reason I was brought in, because I had been working for a 24-hour news channel. They liked that sensibility of you're constantly updating your pieces. GMA, once upon a time, like morning shows would go to bed at some point the night before. I'd be a pretty well-oiled machine when they would air the next morning. But around the time I was joining, it was 24 hours. But to answer your question, yes, there's quirk, and we try to find that right balance. Also, I think the team helps bring some of that balance. There's some people more known for that quirk. It's been, I think George handles it very well, George Stephanopoulos, doing more of the serious things. But, he'll certainly be present for, he'll take part in a cooking segment or help us toss to a feature piece. But it's finding that right balance. But certainly commercial breaks and the change of location help a lot.
Mary, how did GMA cover yesterday's school closing in LA? Did that happen after your 9 o'clock segment ended here on the East Coast? And how did GMA do
we
it
were
for the feed?
We were in contact with, especially we were in contact with LA. So that was, for the latest information, that was that's a perfect example, because that really affected, Los Angeles, New York early on had deemed had handled it differently from Los Angeles. So we were very much, that was just where, that bureau was up, and it was a well-oiled machine. In terms of the broadcast, I'm not privy to watching how that unfolded. I was actually we have a 10 o'clock production meeting. So the control room staff then stays if that's happening. So in that case, I was up at the production meeting to plan for the next day's show. So we still had that production meeting, and I was playing a role on that. So I was in attendance at that. But I know from our LA bureau, but generally what happens is we have a new rundown. It's just a very, very well-oiled machine. It's just for those of you who work for 24-hour cables, it's a similar mentality of we're updating the show. And we always have somebody staying on standby in the event that something's going to happen. But if we know in advance, or there's all kinds of examples. If that when the Pope was visiting, for example, we just did a whole different show. He wasn't out and about or doing different things until later, and so it just made sense to just update, to have a new version of the show. It only makes sense for so many people on the West Coast that they have something fresh. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose of why we purport to be there for them, to inform them.
Do
Do you think that television news, especially cable television news, would be significantly different than it is now if Ted Turner had not lost control of CNN?
I think so, to a degree, but I'll let Alan and Mike weigh in. I think I would be curious what they would think as well. That's a great question. I think it definitely changed. I think, again, Mike and Alan went, they had different takes on CNN, but from my experience, I mean, I was very much, kind of young and wide-eyed, but when I was there, it was, there wasn't the pressure on money or bottom line. I mean, we wouldn't have had a McKinsey group coming through asking us why we were covering what we were covering. I don't know that discussion never would have come up on the meeting about the bottom line, but in the stages in which I was there, just to look at the bureaus that he was doing. I mean, when I was there, when I started, I loved at CNN International, when I would answer the phone when I was back in Atlanta, we had people at embassies calling us for information. We had governments calling us for information on the latest information. We had bureaus, not only, as you know, bureaus are shuttering everywhere, but I mean, Turner was very proud we had a bureau in Jerusalem, and not just in Jerusalem, we had a bureau in Lebanon, and not just Lebanon. I mean, we had, and then we had our presence in Turkey. I mean, we had bureaus around, and the push to open the bureau in Havana. Money wasn't the bottom line. I'm not saying that money, obviously, to a billionaire didn't matter, but it was a different emphasis, a different thought pattern. And I think that changed with those mergers of how they thought about things and how those bureaus were shuttered. I think Turner always said that there is no star. He wasn't interested in the star power. It was, right, the news is a star is what he always said. And, again, I was the wide-eyed young journalist. These guys might have different perspectives, but I think that really carried through. And then when the mergers came through, they kept trying to reinvent the wheel, and I don't think they ever caught up. And they spent a lot of money on that star power and a lot of money trying to garner ratings that the network hadn't been set up for, and then they alienated the core viewers. And so, so to answer your question, significantly different, I don't think so, but different, absolutely. I think it would have been, I think CNN would have found a really great core audience, including, I would note, among millennials. Everyone wants that millennial audience. Everyone says that millennials just don't watch TV, and I politely disagree. I think they're looking for quality, and if they don't see it, they're going to try to find something elsewhere. That would be my argument, and I think if CNN was still able to just concentrate on having unique, authentic news coverage and interesting stories and features and reporters that really, really knew their beats, I think it would be a force to be reckoned with in a way that it's not now. I hope I'm not alienating.
Mary,
Yes.
that was an excellent summary of what I think happened. I would put it in one sentence: the courage and the ingenuity that Ted Turner had were submerged by the merger. My question is, what happens when you or your colleagues get scooped by the other morning shows? Tell us about the behind-the-scenes theatrics that the executive producers go through to inspire you for tomorrow.
Well, we call them booking wars oftentimes, for the great guest of the story of the moment. And that great guest can vary from, some major international figure to, someone, that was photographed in the right place at the right time, someone that may be integral to the story. I mean, it could be something, it could be, the local hero. It could be, the inventor of last year, when those dresses went viral. Blue, is the dress blue? Is the dress black? We spent a week talking about that, if you know what I'm talking about. It could be the inventor of the dress. I mean, the booking wars, that the guest of the moment, it's extraordinarily competitive. Our head booker is an amazing woman, Santina Lucci, who is a force to be reckoned with. Has a really great army of bookers, but it's extraordinarily competitive to get that first relationship, that first exclusive. They're dispatching troops in the middle of the night. I mean, literally, it's a little army of bookers going out, and I don't mean little in a disparaging way. I mean, they're out in force, unfortunately doing some of the door knocking, the phone calling, the trying to lock things up so that they can have that that booking in the morning. And yes, when we don't get it, it's in the control room, we're all obviously watching what's unfolding on our own show, on our own cameras and our different remotes. We're also watching what the competition is doing. Sometimes we know in advance that we've lost the exclusive, and sometimes we don't know until when it's happening. And once in a while we've been misled and we thought we had the exclusive and we did not, and obviously it's a very tense, unhappy series of moments of how did that happen, and it's a very real element of competition, because now the pressure is so great of being the first to have that person, because as we all know, I mean, news can feel very old very quickly. So even if we have to go second, that sometimes happens, as you all know, if you've dealt with booking, sometimes even that, can be a very big disappointment, because the minute that news goes out, it's like, bam. Or there's some of the other big stories sometimes we know that are coming if a network's developed a relationship, the big Charlie Sheen news or something where someone's developed a relationship, and sometimes we'll work on then doing spoilers. Both shows do that, where if we know that they're getting that, then at least we want to be able to package something of our own to feel like we're on top of it and that we're not out of the loop. But it's a big deal.
We have really only time for one more question here. I'm going to steal it. And the question I have, which someone suggested in the back of the room, is tell us a little something about your book.
My book, White Dresses, is a book that I never intended to become a book. I had taken a writing class after the birth of my fourth child. My mother had recently died, and I thought it was polishing off a chick lit novel that I had written in this writing class I'd taken at my kids' preschool. And I wrote an in-class essay, one of those timed essays to kind of warm you up writing, and I wrote about my mother's time. My mother had a fascinating life. She was a nun for almost 10 years, and it was kind of a dark and crazy time, and I wrote about that when she came out. She named me Mary in part because of that time. And it brought the class to tears, and the book basically wrote itself on that phone I keep alluding to. That's our competition, that's how we do live stream. I wrote most of the book on a phone between assignments and in the middle of the night and taking care of the kids in less than a year. And I was very fortunate HarperCollins bought the book right away. It was about, each chapter begins with a story of a white dress that was significant to me, to my mother. Starts with her baptism dress, goes up to my daughter's baptism dress, takes us through my journalism career, through what should have been her journalism career, through my time at CNN and on to Good Morning America. But my mother was very much a believer in the significance of white dresses being marking points in life and a means of starting a new chapter in life anew. And so in part that's why I'm wearing an off-white dress today, but it talks of a lot. It's been compared to a bit of a Catholic Midwest Joy Luck Club, if you like Amy Tan. It's been compared to a little bit to Terms of Endearment, but also if you like some of the crazy things that I talked about in the later years of my, or the rise of my journalist career. One of the white dresses is the little white suit I wore, which was way too short for my mother's liking, but I wore as an on-camera reporter for CNN. But it's a kind of a love letter to mothers and daughters everywhere. Yeah. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Mary, thank you very much. We do have a few books. Mary will go out to the table and you can have your book signed. I'm going to want to get my book signed, okay? And thank you very much for coming. We normally give a card, a membership card to our speaker, but we don't have to. Mary has been one of us for more than a decade, so we're glad to have you as a Silurian. And remember, I want you to all have a marvelous holiday season. Have a very happy new year, and we will see you back here on the 3rd Wednesday of January when we will have Peter Gelb. January 20th, thank you very much. Thank you very much. See you then. Happy New Year.